our corridor on the north end is at the Colesville Park and Ride, and it extends down to the district boundary on the south. It runs through portions of Prince George's County, the city of Tacoma Park, White Oak, Colesville, lots of neighborhoods along the way. It crosses with the Purple Line and intersects with the US 29 Flash service. I want to point out that, and on the north, it intersects with the future service, the planned BRT route along Randolph Road. And on the south, at the district boundary, is what was identified in the master plan. As we've discussed at our last meeting, that's unlikely that we will just stop the service at the district line. And so one of the things that we will talk a little bit more about later on this evening is where is a logical southern terminus. So you'll see that there are, last time you saw kind of one circle generally at the southern end, and now you see that there are three potential alternatives, one at the Tacoma Langley Transit Center, one at Ethan Allen, I'll go back, and one at the Fort Totten Metro Station. There could be other, there could be other possibilities that make sense. And as we get through some of the data, looking at where the connections are, where people are trying to get through to and from, we're going to come back to this question, and we want to get some feedback from you. So I just wanted to flag that as one of the things that we'll be talking about later in the presentation. I also want to just take a little bit of a step back. Our study is this one blue arrow, but in order to get from the recommendation of the master plan all the way to an implementation of this project, there are many steps that have to happen. This study is the goal of this study is to take the recommendation from the master plan and broadly determine how BRT should be implemented on this particular corridor, with all of the details that we know and that we're learning about in terms of right-of-way and traffic and intersections and all of those types of things. So we're looking, the goal of this is to define broad characteristics of BRT in the corridor. Later stages will look at environmental issues. We'll get to the next level of design and access. And of course, construction will come only after all of that work is done and there's been funding identified. So I just wanted to remind us all that the purview of this particular study is to confirm the north and south termini, confirm the station locations, and the configuration of the runway, of the actual transit way along the corridor. We'll talk more about that again later in the study. So I'm going to hand it over to Jamie Henson, who's our project manager with Kittleson. And we will, of course, have a couple of opportunities for questions and look forward to hearing your input throughout the presentation.
All right. Thanks, Sandra. So as many of you may know from the previous CAC meeting, we are now roughly 6 months into what's likely to be a 15 to 18 month study. We are just prior to our first round of public meetings, and we'll talk through those in just a moment. We are at the point where we have finished up our existing conditions analysis, and we're going to give you a bit of an overview of that. We've got 3 different meetings planned, public meetings that we'll talk through in just a moment. Next slide. And so just as a reminder, next slide, please. Is it not changing? I'll keep going. Just a reminder of how our process lays out. We've just finished working through the existing conditions analysis. We'll give you results. We'll talk through that. We'll have a public meeting. Following this, we'll go into the alternatives development process, where we'll meet with you again, the diamonds, or where we're noting meeting with the CAC. We met with you a few months back. We're meeting now. That's what this green diamond is. We'll meet with you again late summer, give or take, around alternatives development, and then come back to you early fall with some results, have a public meeting, and then move from there. Just a reminder of the goals. First of all, these are program goals. These are not so much project goals. These are the program goals for BRT in the county. The county's defined a broad set of goals for the BRT program. There are also our project goals. So mobility choices, so improving access to jobs, activity centers, community facilities, sustainable solutions, minimizing environmental impact and cost, using cost-saving design, corridor safety, improving the safety of our streets, economic growth, promoting economic development with appealing and functional transit, quality service, so providing a fast, reliable, and efficient connected transit service. And then community equity, providing improved and accessible transit service for underserved populations. Next slide. So I want to provide first, before we get going into the existing conditions, a brief overview of what's going to be happening as part of our public meeting 1. It's really more of a session of public meetings. As we noted in the previous CAC, this is a very diverse community, and we're committed to carrying out a public and stakeholder engagement process that reaches and seeks feedback from everyone. This engagement process will involve public meetings, pop-up meetings, community meetings, employer outreach, along with input from the advisory committees, multiple, so the community or the corridor, as well as technical experts from jurisdictions in the corridor. Next slide. So providing an overview, go back, please, I'm sorry. An overview of the meetings that we are having so far. We've had a TAC meeting, that is a Technical Advisory Committee meeting a couple of weeks ago. We're having on the 20th, you can see at the top, that's where we met with representatives from various agencies. We're having this meeting with Corridor Advisory Committee. We're chatting, we're going into the corridor to have what we're calling bus stop chats, where we're setting up at bus stops along the corridor for a few hours at a time to talk to people, to tell them about the project and ask them to get engaged. And then the following week, the week of the 13th, we'll have 3 different options for public engagement, 2 in person and 1 online. So we'll be, our bus stop chats next week on the 7th will be in the afternoon, East-West Highway on Tuesday. On Wednesday, the Tacoma Langley Farmers Market during the midday, and that's Wednesday. Thursday at the Hillandale Shopping Center in the afternoon, and then Thursday at the Hillandale Shopping Center in the afternoon, and then in the late afternoon on Thursday at the White Oak Transit Center. So these are the locations we'll be. You'll see us with a couple of boards, a tent, and trying to engage people who are actively trying to ride the bus, getting on and off, telling them about this project. Then we will have larger scale public meetings. On Wednesday, the 15th, we'll be at the Langley Park Community Center from 4 to 6. We'll have 2 presentations. It will be basically an abbreviated version of what you're seeing tonight. We'll have 2 different presentations at each meeting session. So the meetings will be 2 hours long. We'll have roughly a 12 to 15-minute presentation that starts at the top of the hour, so 4 and 5 o'clock for Wednesday, 6 and 7 o'clock for Thursday, the online meeting, and then Saturday at the CHI Center in the Hillandale community from 11 to 1. Okay. We've also put together some resources for you. We've just updated our project website. If you haven't been there, please take a look at that. Sandra sent out the presentation, I believe, before the meeting. So you're welcome to look at that, and you can find the website, the tiny URL that takes you easily to the website. You can also navigate through the County Department of Transportation's website as well. Has a variety of information. One of the things we wanted to point out, and we'll talk through this more at the end, is a comment map. So we have an open comment map where you're able to go and to click on and provide comments on the map in real time, so that we as the project team can hear and better understand what you're seeing in the corridor. And then what we'll be covering at the public meetings, we'll give an overview of the project. We'll talk briefly through the goals. We'll give a brief overview of what BRT is. We'll talk about equity and land use in the corridor. And then we'll give a brief discussion around the existing conditions analysis. And so now I want to go to a review of what we've been finding in the analysis. So let's start with a brief review of the planning analysis that we discussed at our last session a couple of months ago. The planning analysis that we've done addresses a variety of topics such as land use, interaction with other planned projects, network connections, and safety. You've seen information on that. By all means, if you were not able to attend, please go back. There's a recording, there's slides, so go back and look through that. But our big takeaways from that analysis are 6 that I'll walk through very briefly here. 1, many transportation and development projects are occurring along the corridor. That's what you're seeing to the right of the slide here. Projects in the Hillandale area, public, private, the silver line, the purple line, excuse me, I'm sorry. Projects that Tacoma Park is advancing for bike ped. Much of the corridor is adjacent to equity areas. You don't see that here, but that was one of the things we saw. It's a very diverse corridor, lots of languages spoken and nationalities. There are mixed land use nodes at the major crossings along the corridor. And there's not a terribly robust network. There are few major parallel streets, meaning New Hampshire Avenue has to serve large volumes of traffic of all modes because that's the main choice people have in the corridor. And there's severe crashes and most frequently between the Beltway and University Avenue. So that's a brief overview of what we talked about previously. So what I'm going to do at this point is go into some analysis discussion that focuses on the vehicle travel conditions as well as transit travel conditions. And I want to start out talking about the existing traffic analysis and the existing traffic conditions. And we really framed this analysis around a few questions that we're trying to answer as part of this study effort. 1, where are the delays and queues? Where are cars and buses being held up? Where are they queuing? How much is the queue? 2nd, how long does it take to drive the corridor? How long does it take to drive through various segments or as well as from end to end? And then 3rd, most importantly for tonight, we're going to show you some results and we're going to ask you, and we'll have a polling question for you in just a moment to see, have we accurately represented the conditions that you live today? Let's go to the next slide. Excuse me. So the first thing that I want to talk through is traffic delay. And what we're talking through, or what we've looked at, is the average traffic delay at each signalized intersection in the corridor. And what you're seeing is a scaled approach to illustrate the delay at each of the signalized intersections in the corridor. And so the intent is to show how the level of delay relates to each other in the corridor. And what you can see is how severe the delay is relative to each of the other major intersections. And what you can see that the longest delays are at those major nodes. So specifically Eastern Avenue at the border with the district, just north of there, at Ethan Allen Avenue, University Boulevard, Adelphi Road. There's a few intersections depending on how you count at the Beltway, and then at the top of the corridor at Randolph Road. Now this is the existing AM traffic delay. So this is what you would experience roughly between the hours of 7 and 9 a.m. in the morning. Now going to the PM delay on the next slide, what you can see is that the delays are slightly higher in the PM peak hour. So Sandra, if you wouldn't mind, maybe toggle a couple of times back and forth so you can begin to see it. So this is the PM, this is the AM, and you can see that the delay increases around a few different nodes at Eastern Avenue, specifically around Adelphi Road, as well as at Lockwood Drive and White Oak. And so you can see really specifically around the Beltway and south of the Beltway, you've got a much more extensive delay in the network. And so we're glad to be able to see where you're seeing delay and what level of delay you're seeing. Now, the next thing I wanted to shift to was to talk through travel times. Travel time, meaning how long does it take to travel through the corridor? Now, we performed a more detailed traffic simulation south of White Oak. It's called a VISM analysis. This enables us to evaluate travel time with a pretty high level of confidence. And so you're seeing results from travel times that are only from White Oak south. We didn't do this simulation further north. There's much less traffic further north, and we wanted to steward resources wisely and focus on areas where we could get discernible results from the level of delay. So we looked at travel times for 3 segments south of White Oak, as well as the full corridor length, or that full segment from White Oak to Eastern Avenue. The segments are similar length, but they had very different travel conditions. So the first segment is defined by roughly Lockwood or Route 29 to the Beltway, and that's F and D. The second segment is defined as the Beltway to University, so that's G and C. And then the third segment is defined as University to Eastern Avenue or the edge of the district, and that's B and H. And so what you can see in the lighter brown are those segments. So segment F is the travel time from Route 29 to 495 is roughly 3.5 minutes. The next segment south of that from 495 to University is roughly 7.5 minutes. And the next segment south of University to the district's just under 8 minutes. And so what we're seeing is that travel conditions south of the Beltway are relatively slow. Those segments take longer to travel as opposed to north, where it's much quicker. And the slowest speeds are actually south of University, between University and the district. And this is a little bit misleading because that segment is actually shorter than the middle segment. So the speed, I know we're talking travel times, but if you were to look at the speed, that speed would actually be lower. And so remember, this is the AM. What you should also note is that AM outbound is very fast. It's almost 2.5 minutes faster to travel out in the AM. So let's go to the PM results. All right. So what you're seeing from the PM results is that the northbound travel times are much, much longer in the PM conditions. It's longer than it was in the AM. In the AM, it was roughly 16 to 16.5 minutes. In the PM, it's 21.5 minutes. So it's roughly 5 minutes longer in the PM going outbound. The PM outbound is slower than the inbound AM. So let me give me a second to talk through that. So the peak period, peak direction, and the AM is inbound. And the PM and the peak period and the PM peak period is outbound. So that PM outbound at 21 minutes and 20 seconds is slower than the AM inbound, implying there's more delay in the PM than the AM. And you'll note that the slowest speeds are in that central segment between University and the Beltway. You can see that that outbound segment is 9.5 minutes, as opposed to the southernmost, which is just under 7. You can also see in the inbound direction, so the off-peak direction, that delay is still relatively high. It's at 8.5 minutes. That's actually higher than it is in the AM peak period. It's also worth noting that the southbound travel times, so F, G, and A, E, F, G, and H, are only slightly shorter in the PM. So the AM inbound and the PM inbound are actually very similar, implying that the level of delay that you're experiencing is actually similar in the AM and PM peak period in the inbound direction. So I've just said a lot of words. We're going to shift now to a poll, and then we'll have opportunity to have some questions. And so the poll, I want to be clear on this. It could be a little bit confusing. So the poll is really about, has our analysis captured your experience? It's not about where do you experience delay, how much delay. The question is really, where does your driving experience differ than what we've shown? Have we missed anything? Because one of the things that's really important here is making sure we calibrate our models right, so that when we go back, when we do analysis in the future, it's calibrated correctly. So I'm going to pause here and ask you, where is your driving experience different than what was shown? And it's okay if you don't experience difference. If we got it right, we nailed it, great. But if we missed it, we want to know. Okay. And you should be able to mark multiple choices. Okay, give it another few seconds. All right. So it's seeming like we may be a little bit more off in the central portion of the corridor between University and 495. Sandra, is it okay if we take a few questions and feedback here? Uh-oh.
I apologize. I'm trying to do too many things at once and I lost my screen. Okay. So I see that there are 50% of folks participated. So that either means that it matched up with people's experience and that's fine. And then I see that there are a few people that entered things in the chat. So we'll end this poll and then yeah, it would be a good time to take some questions and make sure that we check what people put in the chat.
All right. Dan, I see you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, in the PM, your problem is more Powder Mill Road, and it backs up halfway to Langley Park. And I think your time is quite a bit too short.
Okay.
It's probably at least double the amount of time you have to the Beltway.
Okay.
You can't, that's not possible to look at modeling. Modeling doesn't represent the real world out there. You got to physically drive it.
Any others that want to comment?
Yeah, I had a question about, I know the what happens in DC is outside of your study area, but I think in the morning that like the vast majority of cars that are going to be going into the city, and there is significant delays on the like basically starting on the other side of Eastern right after that in the morning, and it's very significant delay, and it would not at all match up to your data about it being sort of similar both directions. So I was wondering if there was like any way to account for that, because I understand it's not sort of within the scope, but all the people that you're modeling are immediately going to experience that right after they get out.
Yeah, from a modeling perspective, that was not part of our area that we were reviewing, but you're also right to note that there's that any number of things are changing as you get into the district. The roads are narrower, the signal timing completely changes, the cycle lengths are different, everything's different. And so one of the things that we're doing as part of this effort is working with DDOT to try to figure out how to facilitate better movement of buses. I'm not sure how familiar you are. They've got a very robust program similar to Montgomery County to improve bus service through the district. And so they've even offered to work with us to help us figure out how to use their facilities to advance bus service through the district. So there's no good answer quite yet, but we are working with them, and we all recognize that that's an issue that we want to try to address, and DDOT's very much on board with that. All right.
I had a question.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, can you comment on how, like a bigger picture, how does this analysis feed into the, eventual design and that kind of thing? Are you looking at, where there might be a need for a dedicated lane or something like, is there a threshold for, oh, there's a delay at this end, or, how does that, where's it all feeding into?
Right, so the reason that we do the existing conditions to figure out where are the problems, what's the problem, and how bad's the problem, because ultimately what we want to do is to be able to test potential solutions and make sure we get the right scale of solution. You don't want to get too strong of a solution because it's overkill. You don't want to get too weak of a solution because then it doesn't work. And so the reason that we're doing this is to make sure we have a good, strong understanding of what the problem is, where it is, and the scale of the problem. so that then as we come through to start developing concepts and then alternatives, we appropriately address it.
Jamie, I don't know if there's, why don't we take the hands that are up, and Lewis, I think you had yours up first, and then we'll work our way down the list.
I have a comment and a question, and let's start with the question first. It's easier. What kind of hourly or daily traffic loads are you seeing on New Hampshire Avenue currently?
As far as the volumes?
Yes, correct.
It varies. So there's a real marked difference north and south of Adelphi. Adelphi is really a marker where there's a lot of traffic that exits southbound in the morning and enters PM in the evening. And so north of Adelphi, I don't have the ADT in front of me, but it's between 60 and 80,000. So pretty significant volume. South of there, go ahead.
Just ADT for those who are
average,
not familiar.
yep, sorry, I'm sorry. Average daily traffic, thank you. So that's the average daily traffic. South of that location, it's somewhere on the order of magnitude about half that. I think 35-ish thousand, give or take. And it varies from place to place. People are constantly coming on and off, so it's never constant through the corridor. But it is much, much less south of Adelphi.
Okay, and now for the comment. As I'm sure you're aware of it, when the Hillandale Center opens, that's going to be like dropping a bomb in the middle of New Hampshire Avenue, because with 500 residents there, you know, what is already bad and at times untenable is going to get a lot worse. Thank you.
Yeah, Jamie, do you want to just talk about kind of existing conditions and then layering on the future scenarios?
Right. So one of the things to try to figure out what sort of growth you would expect, and this gets back to the earlier question, a touch on building on your existing conditions. So what we'll do next is we'll start looking at future projections of travel demand, and we'll use the regional travel demand model to do that, to build on. And that includes assumptions about development in the corridor. And so it takes that into account so that we're building from that to understand what the additional travel demand would be, so that when we craft solutions, it addresses that. And K9 is back now.
Yeah, and we'll do the hands and then we'll run through the chat. So Gail, did you want to ask a question?
Sure. I agree with Dan Wilhelm when he posited that your times seem optimistic. I've driven, but mostly taken the bus as a commuter up and down. And I'm kind of astonished by those times. So I guess I wonder, this is kind of a comment, not really for you to go into the technicalities, but I kind of wonder about the veracity of your modeling vice actual experience of driving. And the reason I think it's important, this is an important point, is there's a, as you know, and you commented, there's a dearth of public transportation and modalities up here. And it's difficult to continue to take public transportation when it takes, for example, an hour and a half to go from Hillandale to Fort Totten Metro, which it takes. I've been on the bus and sometimes it's taking me an hour and 45 minutes to come home to Hillandale from Fort Totten. And so the reason I wanted to sort of second Dan Wilhelm's point and bring up this modeling versus actual experience goes to your comment, Mr. Henson, about how you don't want to oversolve problems. But I'm sure transportation experts know how to do this, but the ridership experience, you know, if you have to take an hour and 45 minutes to get home from work a couple times, you know, a month, you're going to stop riding, right? And so, quote unquote, over solving and the times and the actual experiences, I think, are really key in this corridor and for this project and this conversation. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter?
Yeah, my experience is pre-COVID. And what I find is going into the city in the mornings is relatively, even though it takes a long time, it's relatively much shorter than coming home. So it doesn't, people when they go to work stagger their times effectively in the morning. But coming home, regardless of what time people go in, they all seem to leave at around the same time, which causes that major bottleneck as Dan referred to from Powder Mill down to Langley Park and then over to the Sligo Creek area, because that's when traffic backs up. And I find that what is normally a 45-minute trip downtown will become an hour and a half, 2-hour trips coming home. So that's my experience. Now, I also understand that there's been talk saying that, well, behavior will change, the way people go to work and telecommute will change. I look at what Elon Musk did, which is he's demanded and required all of his employees to come in 40 hours a week into work. Now, eventually, I suspect that all employers will do that. You'll have few employers who will still opt for the mixed hybrid work situation, but I suspect that everybody will eventually go back to what it was before, because managers like to see their employees at work to make sure that they're working. I mean, that's the bottom line. So that's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Craig?
Yes, so my experience differs both in the morning and afternoon at Valley Brook Drive and Jackson Road, really between the three schools, Springbrook, White Oak, and Jackson Road. Just, it's very messy there. And another thing is, it seems to be really focused on commuting and commuting hours. Is this bus going to serve people outside of traditional commuting hours?
Yes. I mean, this will be an all-day service. We generally tend to look at the worst period. And in this case, it's the AM and the PM peak, but the service is definitely intended to run throughout the day.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, let's do Dan, and then we'll try to get through some of the comments in the chat.
To build on what Peter said, I don't agree with him on the number of work days, but the effect is the same as what he said. I think a lot of companies will have people in probably 3 days a week, and most everybody needs to be there during those 3 days. So you really have to design the network for those 3 days. You know, some companies will do what Peter said, they'll want you in all 5 days, and depending on the nature of your job, you have to do that. I also agree with the last speaker where Springbrook, White Oak Middle School is fairly congestion, particularly in the morning southbound when the school's opening up. It slows things down quite a bit.
Okay, thank you. This is really helpful to get a fuller picture. I'm just going to try to capture some of the questions. Many of these were either already talked about or we've addressed. So I'll try to just keep us on the ones that we haven't talked to. So we talked about Powder Mill. We talked about what happens once you get to the DC border. Some folks don't really drive during peak times on New Hampshire. There were a few people that wrote that their experience is not that different from what the data showed. What modeling, so there's a question here about what modeling was modeling accompanied with actual driving? I'm guessing that means did we calibrate? Did we do travel time runs? So Jamie, do you want to talk about how the modeling works?
I can give you a brief overview of the modeling. So what we did with the modeling was looked at the volumes and we looked at delay. It's a little bit hard to do travel time runs because the way that the volumes work in the corridor are different. So specifically what we've done, we've actually factored the volumes up to what is roughly a 2019 condition. So the travel volumes are roughly 25% lower now, give or take, and it varies from place to place, but give or take around 20% lower. And so we've had to factor those up. So doing travel time runs is not terribly helpful at the moment. We have been out in the corridor, but doing travel time runs to actually calibrate the model that way is not necessarily the most helpful.
So there was a comment about a lot of traffic using rigs, and this, and there's again another comment about Powder Mill, which we are absolutely aware of. The model be adjusted. Yeah, so there was, I think we talked a little bit about, this is kind of existing, and then the next step will be to layer on all of the planned and approved development so that we have a truer picture of what traffic will look like in the future. Okay, almost all the traffic is going downtown. It will not be served by traffic ending at Eastern. Okay, so that's a termini question, which we will get to. Some of you did a little bit of Google reconnaissance to talk about, to look at what travel times look like. And I think one thing is clear, that there's a lot of variability, which we need to account for. This comment, biggest delay between University and 495 with the ramps, absolutely. And I think that was all of them. Did I miss, if I missed anybody, we'll have opportunity later, but helpful to hear those comments as we kind of think through the existing conditions. So Jamie, did you want to get onto the transit, what we saw with the transit?
So let's go to the next slide. So again, starting with study questions similar to what we did for the vehicle traffic. So first question, how fast and reliable is the bus? And specifically, how fast is the bus? Second question that we use to frame this analysis are, where are people getting on and off? And then the third is, where can people get using public transit? And really maybe a better way of framing that is, where can people easily get using public transit? And so we looked at things like ridership delay, speed, travel time. We looked at the bus stops, what's happening, what sort of amenities there are in the bus, at the bus stops, and then how the transit network connects to other locations. To do this, we looked at WMATA and ride-on passenger data collected through automated passenger counters as well as automated vehicle location. We reviewed and analyzed data from the fall of 2019 to get a better understanding of what a more hopefully typical, but typical is a bit of a moving target, but try to get a better understanding of what had been a normal 2019 condition, and hopefully will become a long-term pattern of ridership. And we also reviewed some of the bus stops as well as transit access, as well as the infrastructure. So bus stops as well as sidewalk inventory. So I wanted to start by looking at an origin destination analysis. So this is not transit in particular. This is, where are people going to and from? So zooming out to better understand, where are those corridor residents working? So people who live in the corridor and noting where they're working. So we use a large employer data set. It's called LEHD data to understand where corridor residents work. And there are a few nodes that began to stand out. And so the darker purple is where there is more intensity of folks working who live in the corridor. And so those 4 nodes became pretty clear. One was White Oak in the corridor, and you can see that in the north. Then immediately to the west in Silver Spring. Then to the west of that in the 270 corridor, and then south into the district, and specifically into the core of the district. And so that's where people who are living in the corridor are going based on the understanding of this data. So beginning to frame out, where are folks trying to go? It highlights the need for connections in this corridor. And so while we're talking mostly about a service that's going north-south, there are a lot of people that are making some various different movements in the corridor in addition to going north and south. Next slide, please. And so what I want to talk about next is really around the routes and some of the analysis of the routes. So there are a variety of routes and service patterns in the corridor. There are quite a few. There's through bus service from White Oak to Fort Totten Metro. There's frequent service to both Silver Spring and Tacoma. There are multiple services that are going across the corridor that are connecting. You know, I can go through the lines to be specific. You've got the 20 and the 16 in various points that are relatively frequent going to Silver Spring or Tacoma. You know, the through service with the K6 and now the K9 that recently restarted, and the C8 further north. And then varieties of crossing services, the Flash service, the Z6 and 8, the C2 and 4, ultimately the Purple line as well as the F4. So all of these are taking people across the corridor and providing easy connections to various places, most often Silver Spring and Tacoma Park, also over into College Park as well as Hyattsville. So that's where folks are able to get relatively easily on transit. Then what we wanted to do was look at how much transit is on the corridor. And so what we did then was look at the number or the transit frequency and the number of buses that are on the corridor. And as it turns out, there's quite a few buses. At various points, there's 3 or 4 buses, or there's a bus every 3 or so minutes in portions of the corridor. The K6 operates very frequently up and down at 10 to 12 minute frequencies. I believe the K9, I can't recall off the top of my head since it's restarted. I think it's 15 or 20 minute frequency. I can't recall off the top. I haven't had a chance to look at the details of that. There are multiple high frequency routes that are coming on and off the corridor to serve other places, specifically Silver Spring and Tacoma Park. And then there's a really high combined frequency south of Piney Branch. So like I said earlier, roughly 3 or 4 buses or a bus every 3 to 4 minutes south of Piney Branch, give or take. And then as we move into ridership on the next slide, you can begin to see where are people, where's the heavy ridership? And this is from, again, the automated passenger count data that are on the buses. So looking at the ridership in the corridor, you can begin to see nodes of ridership, and you can see nodes around White Oak. You can see nodes around the Hillandale community. You can see nodes around University Avenue, Ethan Allen, and then you can see high levels of boardings and alightings at Tacoma Park. And roughly when combined, all of these routes combined, now this is not the combination of all the routes of all the riders on the routes. This is how many people are specifically in this New Hampshire Avenue corridor that connects to Fort Totten. There's roughly 9,500 daily boardings in the corridor, and that's across multiple routes. So there's not an insignificant amount of ridership already existing in the corridor. Now, as we delve more deeply into the performance, into the operations, we look specifically at the K6 speed, and this is speed that doesn't include stop time. So it's not quite going to be K9 speed, but it's actually going to be close because it does not include stop delay. And so we looked at the K6 speed from, again, from Fort Totten to White Oak. And what we began to notice, and this is AM conditions, we started to notice that it slows at University. It's slower as it approaches the Beltway. It's slower near the district, but much, much faster as you get north of the Beltway. Then scrolling to PM conditions, you can begin to see that that conditions slow down. It's I feel like we missed that slide, Sandra. I think we must have copied over that incorrectly. Sorry about that. We missed our points here, guys. Sorry, we'll have to correct that for you. But what you can see in the PM is that conditions are worse. So toggle again. So that's, this would be the PM and then the AM, right? And you can see that there's gradually more red and more yellow and more orange in the PM than the AM, indicating that buses are slower. The red are locations that are generally about 10 miles per hour speeds or less. Green indicating over 20 miles per hour. So broadly south of the Beltway, except for a few more free-flowing instances, you're going less than 20 miles per hour. And again, that does include stop time. In addition, we also wanted to take a sample of the bus stop infrastructure. And so we went out and took a variety of photographs of bus stop locations. And so there was a variety of types of treatments, shelters in some locations, benches, and my favorite, the rocking chairs at other locations. Almost all of the stops require riders to wait and queue very close to the street with little to no buffer. Many are not ADA accessible, and often the stops, as you can see on the bottom right in particular, or the right bottom and middle right, are between a service road and the main line of New Hampshire Avenue. Going a little more in detail on the multimodal infrastructure, so focusing a little bit more on sidewalks specifically rather than bus stops. They're obviously connected, but as we focus a little bit more on multimodal infrastructure more broadly, there's limited bike and pedestrian networks. It's a fairly uncomfortable pedestrian bicycle experience in many areas, and you can see why. You can see that there's pinches between walls, there's utility poles, but in some places, there's integration of services like Capital Bike Share to extend the trip. But in others, again, you've got medians where buses are stopping. So with this concludes the overview of our analysis. So we wanted to pause here and provide another opportunity to provide some input through a poll. So what you've seen is our overview of traffic and transit analysis. You've seen where we're seeing people get on and off the buses. You've seen where where people are going to and from, their origins and destinations more broadly. So at this point, we wanted to pause and get some feedback on your initial thoughts on what a southern terminus should look like. Again, we've noted 3. There very well could be others. Please note others if that's what you think, and we can talk through those. But we'll give you a few seconds, maybe 20 or 30 more seconds.
And Jamie, there were a couple of questions in the chat. So Shane was asking about Hillandale. Wasn't listed as high ridership, even though it was specifically mentioned and shown. I think there is fairly high ridership at Hillandale.
Oh, did I not? Right. That would have been an oversight if it wasn't specifically mentioned.
So, yeah, you are correct. There is a fair amount of ridership there.
Right. I'm sorry if I didn't call that out appropriately.
Lewis pointed out that the ridership is about 10, depending on what the ADT is in different sections. It's about 10% of the ADT. I think it depends where we are, but
right.
And then all right, we got 14 responses. I think. If anybody else,
this is
big surprise.
I don't think anybody's going to be surprised by the revelation.
Well, we wanted to, due diligence, make sure we weren't missing something, and there wasn't, big, audience for some other alternative. It's nice to get consensus every once in a while on something.
Yes. We can't all agree on some things.
Do you want me to read out before we open it up, Jamie? Maybe we'll start with the comments this time.
Yeah.
Peter said, doesn't the transit corridors being discussed here funnel people to certain areas from where they live to where they work, thereby limiting the opportunities to jobs, a de facto redlining in a sense, versus what true cross-route transit beyond the scope of Eastern Montgomery County, where greater job opportunities may exist? I'm not sure I followed that, but if you did, you can respond. Otherwise, maybe Peter will ask you to clarify the question.
This is Peter. As he was going through and talking about the cross transit, I noticed that we were just discussing the eastern part of the county, and I'm thinking here that that seems to funnel people into a certain area, a certain place that they have to go to get jobs, when there are opportunities. And again, this will come with the BRT, the Randolph Road BRT, whenever we get to the study of it. But I think we need to look at it from a bigger picture. I understand that this is strictly the Randolph Road BRT, but I just wanted to plant that in, that, you know, by looking at these routes in a certain direction, that we have to be concerned of historical redlining, not only economically, but in this case, via transit to certain jobs. I mean, being a minority, that's the way I look at it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's
I think it's important for us. I think it's important for us to make sure that we're looking at it through that lens, which is one of our project goals. So that's, you know, important if we're missing something. I'll also say that, you know, for better or for worse, we're implementing the master plan.
Yes.
Over time, because we can't you know, do it all at one time.
I understand.
Yeah, and the ultimate goal is to connect to the Randolph Road and to make sure that all of those connections are integrated. And I think that's important for us to be thinking about that, you know, as we go through this work. So that's an important thing for us to be, you know, on our.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. So the other thing that I'll mention, Jamie, and then we can, you know, see if there are others that want to chime in, is that we've already. So Jamie initially mentioned the technical advisory group, which is really a staff level coordination where we meet with representatives of all of the jurisdictions and WMATA and State Highway to make sure that they're up to speed and they can weigh in on some of the more technical aspects. And we've begun some conversations with both WMATA and the district on the possibility of terminating at Fort Taunton. So the good news is that nothing is imminent, but they are both of those agencies were receptive to that as an option, and we're going to continue to work with them. We obviously want to get additional feedback from this group as well as from the public as we have our public meetings in June. But we have been also in conversation with WMATA and the district, so that we're hopeful that we, you know, if that's the direction that we end up going, that we have the possibility to make that happen. So I want to share that as well. And then there's another comment I see, Jason, related to improving east-west travel. As more flash lines begin service, would it be possible to have buses switch lines where they cross each other? For example, a bus starts 29 and then switch. Yeah, one of the things that we've been talking about, sorry, I didn't read the whole thing, is that, you know, as we get into a more robust network, that we can look at different service patterns. So you potentially could have, you know, thinking about the North Bethesda route, which potentially crosses over 355 and could connect with Randolph. One route, one service pattern could be to take that flash infrastructure, right? If there's dedicated lanes all or portion of that way, but you could sit on a bus from North Bethesda and come all the way to the FDA, you know, connect to 650 and get to the FDA if that's where you choose to work. So we ultimately hope that there will be some really good additional connectivity that is fast, efficient, and you'd be able to have a one or a limited ride seat, one or two ride seat to get much further than you can today. So we hope that we, you know, we will make it to that, and that we can all benefit from that in the future. But yes, that's the ultimate vision. Are there other? There's Cicero. I see your hand.
Good evening, everyone. Sandra, as you were talking about, you know, coordination with WMATA and the district, I know you're also coordinating with Prince George's County, since we have a very important connection there at Langley Park. Yep. I was wondering if it would be appropriate for us to discuss the possibility of improving traffic along New Hampshire Avenue. And where I'm getting at, there was a study by State Highway of a ramp that would connect, you know, would give another connection to the Beltway. And I believe that the results would be an improvement on traffic on New Hampshire Avenue, there was a concern in Prince George's County of cut through traffic. But, considering that this, service would be improving the lives and the accessibility and new transportation mode for residents in Langley Park, maybe there could be a conversation where, we could try to get that study back and look at alternatives to reduce the through traffic in the neighborhoods, but also to go back and get that ramp to improve operations on New Hampshire Avenue.
I think that one of the nice things about this project, one of the complicating factors and the nice things is that we're working with all of our jurisdictional partners. And I think I mentioned in our last meeting that the safety study that's being done on New Hampshire Avenue is in partnership with Prince George's County. And SHA is part of the project, the technical advisory group. So I think that we can certainly work with them and bring up some of these issues. We also have to, it's a much larger project, obviously, than what we have on as our scope. But I think the question of how do we advance those conversations is absolutely appropriate, and I think we can bring that up at one of our future meetings with them. Yes, and Eileen is agreeing with me that this is a separate project, but one that's, I know, has a lot of energy around it, that's fair to say. But we just need to be careful about the project versus some of the other initiatives that are out there. There's a lot of potential on this corridor. Okay, and Shane, so our project, let's table that for this discussion, and potentially we can look into it a little bit more and come back to you all with some more information on that at a future meeting. Drew, did you want to jump in?
Yes, I was just wanted to, unless I'm mistaken, at some point there was in their recommendation just to assess the possibilities of extending the northern end of the line beyond Randolph and Colesville to—
You brought that up.
Yes,
right,
the point beyond the ICC, because what happens is it's a very, very diverse communities, particularly on Fridays where thousands and thousands of folks gravitate towards, particularly Norwood and New Hampshire in that junction there.
Yeah, I think there's lots of potential for. I think one of the suggestions was, could it terminate at Briggs Cheney at the Park and Ride where the 29 terminates? There's lots of different opportunities to think about further. I know that there are conversations and people who are looking to have 29 extend further to the north. So I think absolutely in the longer term, there's opportunities to look for potential extensions to the service.
Are you just talking just as aspirationally, or is just something that we could discuss to include as part of this conversation? Because it goes back to what Peter is saying. If the opportunity presents itself and it could be supported by data, I do think, given the growth patterns in East County, that sooner or later we're going to have to address that particular concern.
Okay, no, I think that's fair, and let's think about that. And again, we can come back with some additional thoughts.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Drew. I don't see any other hands right now. So, Jamie, did you want to keep going? Then we can also come back if there's, at the end we'll have additional time.
And we are close to the end. We're here. It's time to talk next steps. So as we wrap up the presentation of existing conditions, we did want to give an overview of next steps and zoom out just a touch more to talk through what will happen next, the bigger picture next in the study, and then the more immediate next of what will happen over the next few months. So the last time we chatted, we talked about how BRT focuses on enhanced vehicles, enhanced stations, and enhanced operations. Vehicles and stations are being addressed at the program level for the entire flash system. So the vehicle has been determined to be a 60-foot articulated bus. Station templates have been developed for the system. And so that's not really going to be part of this discussion, but enhanced operations will be. That's where we will spend most of the time as we move forward, focusing on how to enhance the operations. And so what we'll look at will be the station locations. So the very precise station locations. And when I say that, I mean, is it on the side of the road, which side of the road, near side, far side, how do people get there at a high level? It will address running ways. So where would the bus run? Is it going to run in traffic? Is it going to have an exclusive lane? Is it going to be in the center of the side? And then it will address intersection treatment. So how are treatments at the intersections made? And so once these approaches, we'll put these together in concepts first, but then we'll ultimately frame them into alternatives that will be tested to determine their effectiveness. Next slide. All right. Oh, I'm sorry, go back. You were already ahead of me, Sandra. Sorry about that. So we'll start by considering one more down. Just off key, just a touch. There we go. We'll refine station locations. So the master plan listed 12 specific station locations. What we'll do is first verify them. We'll see if we need more. We'll see if some of these might be combined. We'll consider potential additional locations for those stations. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we'll identify a specific station location. So it'll be at this intersection on this side of the intersection so that we can better understand what conditions will be in the future as we begin to model those conditions. As we think through stations, we'll look at a variety of conditions as we consider potential locations. So we'll look at things like land use density, the mix of land use, the intensity of those land uses, as well as current ridership trends. So where are we seeing nodes of activity to make sure that we're serving those well. And then we'll look at, can't go further, there we go, concepts for BRT to consider. And so we'll look at lane configurations, and maybe the buses are in mixed traffic, maybe they're curbside lanes, maybe there's a single median bus lane for peak periods, or maybe there's 2 median bus lanes. We'll consider how the bus running way, this is what I refer to when I say things like, when I say running way, where's the bus running? In addition, we'll consider how the BRT will be aligned at the intersections along with station access needs. So to summarize, we will be doing public engagement over the month of June, over the next 3 weeks. We will develop a synthesis of findings, which will include our technical analysis, but will also include the feedback that we're getting from this group as well as the broad public. We'll start thinking through more specifically objectives and measures of effectiveness. The goals for the project are set at the program level. We'll be refining those stop locations, and then we'll develop concepts. And so with that, that's what we're going to be doing next. And so what we would like to ask of you is to help us spread the word. There's obviously a lot going on with this project, and we really hope you can help us get the word out. We've created an outreach packet with a variety of items for your use and distribution. So to help spread through social media, we've got a newsletter, we've got a meeting poster, we've got a summary. You can see the materials as an example of what we've put together. This was, I believe we sent this to the CAC earlier this afternoon or evening.
That's right.
Not, okay, good. And so you should have these materials to be able to send out and help us get the word out about this, about these meetings.
We're looking forward to meeting you in person at these meetings, if possible, and your communities and friends. This is a link sent out earlier today with visuals and text to help you spread the word.
Great.
So if you have a school listserv or a religious community or some other group that you're engaged in that has a Facebook group, a Nextdoor community, it would be really great if you're comfortable. We have a text version if it's a text only platform. but any way that you can help us spread the word would be great, and we would appreciate it. I did want to ask, there was a postcard that, if you live within a quarter mile of the corridor, you should have received, and if you haven't received it yet, you will. I'm just curious if folks can raise their hand or put in the chat if you've already received it. We just want to make sure that it's getting out there. So if you've received it, if you could just let us know in the chat, that would be great. And we will take another couple of minutes for a few last questions. I see, Craig, you have your hand up, so you're welcome to take yourself off mute.
Yeah, this is going to be in the far future, but are there plans, or could there be plans to eventually switch to a trackless trolley system? So instead of going full battery electric or hybrid, we put up the wires and just run a trackless trolley down New Hampshire?
I guess anything is possible. Right now, the county is looking at zero emission vehicles and transitioning our fleet. I think that will be the next step. And beyond that, I think, who knows where the technology will go, and perhaps what you're describing, perhaps we could go trackless, perhaps, I mean, there's lots of opportunities. And I think that the county is definitely committed to making sure that we are looking at sustainable choices and picking vehicles and modes that are, appropriate to help with environmental concerns. But I don't have a pithy short answer to say yes or no at this point. But I think that we are committed to, looking at the most current environmentally sound options for our transit and for our fleet. Dan, I see you've got your hand up.
Yes, I guess build on something Peter said quite a while ago about, I think what your study needs to also do is look at the crossover between different BRT lines, like at New Hampshire and Randolph, and where you're going to have two lines. You need to worry about how those intersection people transfer from one to another, or do they? Absolutely. Yep. Same, I guess you're going to do that down at Langley Park anyway, but we're going
to look at that at Lockwood, where we'll intersect with 29, and of course when it intersects with Randolph on the north. I think that that's absolutely a piece of what we're trying to, the building blocks that we're trying to put together.
Yeah, I look at this as another piece of the bigger puzzle. And absolutely. Eventually we'll have all 10 corridors and the Purple Line all operational.
Yes, that's the goal. Eileen has a couple of questions, and she cannot take herself off mute, so we'll rely on her chat. So she wrote, it's more important for the New Hampshire BRT is how to get a median station in the space available. One area possible for a station in Hillandale is near the Elton Road area. So we definitely look at that. And she recalls a BRT stop at Adelphi and Oakview. Has that changed? There is one at Adelphi, right?
That was, I thought it was, but those are adjacent. I believe those are adjacent intersections, if I'm remembering correctly. So we may have misinterpreted it. Or
yeah, we'll go back and double check, right, and make sure that we got that right.
Right.
Hector wrote, one of the graphics, Nadia, didn't open. Can you take a look at that?
Oh yeah, no, I just did. It okay. Opens.
Okay,
I added the extension that it needed.
Okay.
And all of our Spanish translation materials have been reviewed by native speakers.
Yep. So if there are no further questions, I will again thank you all for your time and commitment to this project. I know it's not always easy to come online when there are multiple conflicting priorities, so we appreciate everyone. The New Hampshire Avenue Study Map comment function is not working. We will look at that. This is good. You got, I mean, the other thing that you all serve is a double check, right? So before we go live with the public, let's work out the kinks and and make sure everything is working. So thank you all for your input and the conversation, really helpful. We look forward to seeing many of you at the outreach events coming up this month. And we will be in touch over the summer, and likely our next meeting will be after Labor Day. So if we don't see you, have a wonderful summer, and we hope to see you at some of these events. And we will be in touch regardless over the summer by email with some updates as the project advances, so you're kind of aware of the work that we're doing over the summer. So thank you all, and have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.
Bye, everybody.
Nadia, can you, thank you all, record or stop recording?
Yes, give me just a second.